Hello and welcome to episode 121 of A Gamer Looks at 40. My name is Bill Tucker, and on this episode, we continue discussing introductions and first impressions to the epic adventure known as Final Fantasy VII. Now, as the marquee game for the entire franchise, Final Fantasy VII's reach and influence have spanned generations, and as a result, so have the first experiences. My first guest on this week's show is content creator and Sephiroth cosplayer Diana McQueen. Please check out her work on TikTok at StormVexed. You'll find the handle in the show notes below, as she shares her first encounter with this landmark game and why it took hold as a personal classic. So, thank you so much for taking time today to chat with me about Final Fantasy VII, a game you clearly love very, very, very much. So let me just start off by saying what was your first introduction to the game? How did you get involved with it? And we'll just kind of go from there.
I don't want to lose my geek cred at any point during this conversation, but it's
impossible.
It's impossible. I mean, I am a very, very big nerd, so I don't know if that would happen. But I have a very roundabout way. I'm not a technological early adopter, so I came to the PlayStation very late. I did not have enough money to buy it for a very long time, but man I happened to be dating in college did have one, and he was replaying it because I heard about it. Of course, I had played the original Final Fantasy. I had played 6 a little bit, or 3, whenever it was, at friends' houses on other consoles that I did not have because we opted for Sega. So I had heard things about it, but it just was not available to me. And, 97 was still the Wild West, dial-up internet, and wonderful things like that. And I was trying to be part of the geek community, but I wasn't quite in the Final Fantasy community yet. So, he was playing it, and I was just... I don't watch people play video games. I don't understand it, but I could not look away. It was that and Xenogears. I was like, I'm reading a book, essentially, because he would get to a cutscene, it would just be scrolling text, and I'm like, this is awesome. Beautiful illustrated book. And it's just always stuck with me. Especially Sephiroth, I feel like everybody feels like this, but he was just a perfect villain in this, slick, cool, I'm evil, I'm unredeemable, and I don't care kind of, guy you love to fight and you're scared of. Just within the world, and we're not competing with anyone else at this point in the conversation. Right. We'll take that in a different direction. But and he's what stuck with me the most because I just found him fascinating. I was also interested in psychology and literature and all the mythology and all the other stuff, so that helped. But it wasn't until I got a PS1, and honestly, when I went to the game store to buy a bunch of games I had missed, I picked up Final Fantasy VIII first. I really loved the box art. It looked really beautiful, and all the characters looked cool, and then I played that obsessively until I finished it. I even had the guidebook. I did everything. But then I played Final Fantasy VII for myself, and it was incredible. It wasn't the beautiful, the CGI that we had at the time, it was obviously taking a step back. So obviously Final Fantasy VIII was I was like, this is beautiful. I want to play this one. But yeah, it's just, it was kind of piecemeal, but I got there, I guess is the answer.
And about what year was that when you first started playing Final Fantasy VII rather?
I believe it was 2000 or 2001. At first, my friend gave me a PS1. It was very nice of her.
No, very nice. That's cool.
Yeah, because the PS2 was about to come out.
So it's a little later. So there's a lot of time involved. There's some stuff in the early online days, early online, right? We're not talking crazy online. No YouTube yet or anything like that.
Yes.
What struck you first about the game when you first played it? What struck you as special, or just what got its hooks in you?
I think Final Fantasy in general had always intrigued me, even though I couldn't play it. I really like the title, and I'm always like, what does that mean? You know, and I mean, I know now, but it overall, I mean, just you know, especially watching someone else take the pressure off of having to fight all the bosses and the strategies and leveling up, and all of that. It was how the story was being told. It's really, I mean, as you know, sometimes Final Fantasy is a little, you know, ham-fisted, or, you know, they're a little too mysterious when they shouldn't be. But this was, it was told in like a perfect way. And everybody likes to say it's so confusing, but it's honestly, the only thing I can think of to compare it to is Endgame, Marvel Universe Endgame. Because there's just so many pieces, and it was planned forever. And you just have to sit down and, you know, so put all the puzzle pieces together. And then it's not just make sure you're telling things, you know, completely, but you can't front load it, you know, with all this explanation. But you also can't, you know, forget to tell people things. And it was how it kept the suspense going. The suspense and the mystery and the music. It definitely stuck with me. I mean, Sephiroth's many theme songs are very iconic, and they just right in there. And I love how creepy it was, even though it was polygons. Like, you know,
totally.
Had no idea what was going to happen next. Like, never heard a story like that before. I love stories like that. Ones that are, you know, they're not overly complicated. They use all their pieces. So
I think that's a really good way of putting it. Using all its pieces, Final Fantasy VII is very good at creating. If Final Fantasy VI and the early ones are kind of these straight lines with little side quest diversions, even the newer ones, kind of straight lines with these diversions. Final Fantasy VII is this big tangled web column. It's very intricate inside of it. It's one column. It's like one story. Yeah. But everything's very interwoven with itself, which to me makes it feel like it's complicated and convoluted. Because in the game itself, you're going back in time, forward in time, back in time, flashback this, and it really drops you in the middle of it with no information. I really respect the way it tells that story, because as you go through it, there's a lot of richness there.
Absolutely. And I don't think I knew the term at the time, but the unreliable narrator trope.
Sure. Yeah.
I don't care how many times you use that. I'm going to be like, every time, you know, like, cause you lead, especially if the author is good. And that's why I keep thinking, like, this cannot be a movie. Every once in a while, I'm like, how would I boil this down to like a less than 3-hour movie? And you can't, there are no there's side quests, but there's no piece that you can take out of this. If you did, it wouldn't make sense. And honestly, I've read so many things about the history of Square Enix, like trying to figure out where this game came from. And I have a better idea than I did before, but I'm just like, what? Like, where did this game come from? And I feel like a lot of people feel that way.
So when you played it, how old were you when you first played Final Fantasy VII? I didn't get the chronology quite right.
Well, when I was watching somebody play it, I think I was 19.
Okay.
And
so you were older.
It was like 3 years after it came out, 3 or 4 years. It's 97, right? Yeah. And then sometimes I forget. All time condenses on me, and I think I played it for myself like maybe 2010, 2009. I moved around a lot during that period, so it was like selling stuff, and I think that's when it's landed, and I was like, finally did it, check that off, you know. And of course, didn't breed any chocobos, didn't get all the summons, did not want to, you know. And I just recently replayed it on Switch because I was waiting from like the PlayStation 1 days. All I wanted was like a Sega Game Gear with all the Final Fantasy games on it. Like, that's been my thing that I've always wanted. And even the PSP didn't have all the games on it. And I'm like, come on, you know. And I knew the technology like didn't work at the time, but now it does. And now I have a whole dock of every single Final Fantasy. I mean, up to 11 is the MMO. So everything after that is computer, and, you know, but yeah, I'm very happy. So that's great. I played 8 again right away, and you know, this was what I was waiting for the the Pixel remasters.
Right.
And then I played 7 again. And the Pixel remaster experience was very different. I feel like something was off. I don't know what it was, but I was flying through the game, but I wasn't leveling up. And I think it's because I was so interested in the story that I didn't actually do a lot of the side quests, and I didn't just randomly go around killing stuff. I don't know, but I did get all the way to the end, and Sephiroth killed me. So
that happened
a lot, and then I was like, oh man, I have to go back and do something. I have so many saves, so I'm like, okay, I have to go back and figure out what I didn't do. But I always go, I don't know, spoiler alert, but I always go to the cave to meet Lucretia to give Vincent his closure, if you can even call it that. I love that part.
It's a great moment. From new friends to old pals, my next guest would likely murder me in my sleep if I didn't interview him for this series. I mean, just kidding, he's not a violent person, but he'd be rather upset, and the series wouldn't be the same without him. Please welcome to the show streamer, game critic, and author of the Mobius 7 fan fiction, the one and only Games with Coffee. The fancy countdown is irrelevant to me, but Mr. Coffee, how are you, good sir? We are here to talk about a game that I think you've been wanting to talk about ever since we started this series way back in February when I started interviewing for this.
Yeah, I already put my name down.
This is the one. Yes,
this is the one.
I think a friendship would be dashed if this didn't happen.
Absolutely.
I think that would be like, that's it. We can no longer be pals.
No, don't say that. I don't think that might be a little bit extreme, but
perhaps. Okay, that's fair. That's good to know. But I will say there's no way I could do this without having you on board. It's all about Final Fantasy VII, a game that is truly near and dear to your heart. So I'd just love to start at the beginning. I think you might have shared some of this in different episodes, but just so we have a kind of like a complete chronology, what was your introduction to what would become a lifelong love of a game?
Okay, so let's recap here, folks. 1997, November, I was in 5th-ish grade around the time. Just turned 10 that year. So yeah, just hit 5th grade. Funnily enough, actually, this is going to be a bit of a revision here. I remember I got a couple of gaming magazines, and there was this one beautiful ad of Final Fantasy VII, and I think the ad read, and this is brilliant copy, by the way. You can feel your eyes bleed. You can hear your eyes bleed just because of the visuals, right? It was just that visual of Sephiroth just ripping out the statue of Genova in the Nibelheim reactor during the flashback sequence, and I was like, I think I remember seeing that. I was like, oh, okay. That's pretty cool.
Gotcha. Nice.
But then fast forward months later, it was an Ambassador Video, a little mom and pop rental shop that was down the street from where I live. And one of the games, me and my brother, we go there from time to time, rent some games here and there, mostly on the PlayStation, because they had Super Nintendo games. They had, I think they still had NES games back then, but Super Nintendo, Sega Genesis, and PlayStation games, and they even had some Saturn games and stuff like that too. But Final Fantasy VII, the cover actually pulled my eyes first, and we're like, okay, Shane, bro, we're gonna get this game. We're gonna start playing it, and bring it home that same night, put it in, and we were just treated to this amazing spectacle. It's like right off the bat, like things just get action heavy. You're jumping off a train. You're a dude. You're a spiky blonde haired dude wielding a giant sword. Your teammate is a big dude with a gun for an arm. I mean, how cool is that? He's got a gun for an arm. That's as cyberpunk as you could possibly get. Yep. And he's like, "Come on, newcomer, follow me." And you're going on about you're taking out bad guys with your giant sword, and then you meet up with Biggs and Jesse. They're trying to break into the reactor, and they're like, "Who's this guy?" And it's like, Didn't really know. He's a former soldier, but he quit them and now he's one of us. Didn't catch your name. And then you get to name him, and he's like, I'm Cloud. And I'm like, oh my god, I love this guy.
Now, did you name him something other than Cloud, or did you stick with that?
Nope, stuck with the name.
Good. Excellent.
Like, every time I play Final Fantasy VII, I think to myself, maybe I should rename him, but I end up going back to the defaults. I can't just name them other characters. I can't change their names. It has to be Cloud. It has to be Tifa. It has to be Barrett.
Interesting. No, I love that. I think that's great. I'm very much so the same way nowadays. When I was younger, I think I was so in the Final Fantasy 1 mode where you had to choose a name. Mm-hmm. But I definitely, starting with 6, I was like, no, I got to keep the originals. Don't mess with the perfection.
Don't mess with perfection. Exactly. 100%.
So for you, one of the first things you noticed was that box art. That box art for Final Fantasy 7 is extremely striking. I mean, it is.
I'm looking at it right now.
As am I. Yeah, it's almost half of the image is just pure white. It's got Shinra in the distance. I guess the Shinra headquarters, right? In the distance.
Shinra headquarters in the distance.
In almost like this white contrasty. It's like blending into the background to a certain extent, and then you just have Cloud with this giant sword. Like this image is 1/4 sword.
Yes,
it's staring up at this thing.
It's glorious.
It is glorious. Like, it is really, really cool. Like, it is an amazing image. It's really striking. It's one of those I always wonder if the box art helps to sell the game, and I think in this situation it totally did.
It really did. It really was just like, whoa, dude with a giant sword. I don't know what this is about, but I am in for it. Let's go.
Yeah, it is super cool. So, and then of course the visuals struck you immediately because there was literally nothing like it.
No, the only other RPG I played up until that point was Dragon Warrior, or Dragon Quest for those purists out there. But yeah, Dragon Warrior was my very first RPG. I loved that game. I didn't even know what an RPG was, but I'm like, oh, this is my jam. I love this.
Now, what was... Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No. I was just going to say, and then there was also Zelda 2, but I don't think you can really count that as an RPG.
It's got RPG elements. I think you can loosely call it. There is progression, and you can choose abilities, and I don't know. Hey, you know what? Genres and labeling. Look, I just released a Chrono Trigger episode, all right?
I've yet to listen to it, by the way.
That's fine. It's the weirdest thing it's one of the weirdest things I've done, and I kind of love it.
But weird is good, anyways.
It's weird. It's fun. But anyways, so when you were playing it for the first time, visuals, of course, caught you immediately. How did you feel? Now, did you play this of its time, or was this further down the line? I
of its time. It was my very first Final Fantasy game. It just came out. When I walked into it, I had no notion of what Final Fantasy was.
Interesting. So it really just sold you on just the cool cover art. Like, oh, this thing is cool. I want to check this out.
Yeah. That's basically what happened. It's just, that's awesome. Cool cover art, and like, oh yeah, like, let's do this.
So I also find it very interesting how I feel like Final Fantasy VII is the time when games grew up with the generations, because it was a lot more adult subject matter. You have profanity, kind of sort of profanity. You had the fake blips and bleeps in the dialogue boxes.
I love those.
It's just great. It's super fun. And it happens early, like right away. Barrett's has some curse words.
Curses.
Curse words at it. It's got this cyberpunk feel, like you said. It's dealing with corporations, not kingdoms, which again is probably more adult, than the fantasy stuff we've been dealing with Final Fantasy 1 through 6. Mm-hmm. So how did that feel for you? How did that land for you as someone who was, you said 11, I think, right?
I was 10. Yeah, 10 going on, 10, almost 10 and a half, like going on 11. Honestly, it was just, it felt real to me, I mean, I don't know, I was really thinking about it at the time, but because I grew up with this game so much, I could see parallels between the setting and the story of Final Fantasy VII with real life as it is. Like, corporations, they take up a lot of our own resources. They consume tons of natural resources. The people are downtrodden. They live in the slums. They live in poor conditions. Cost of living, inflation, affordability, that sort of stuff. It's still 37. No, sorry, 20. No, is it 30? No, 27 years later.
27, yeah.
Yeah, 27 years later, those themes are still relevant today as they were back in 97. I keep forgetting I'm 10 years older than Final Fantasy VII.
It's crazy.
And
crazy.
yeah, it's just like, again, sorry, I had a bit of a brain fart, but I know we're talking about the how the more adult, how it kind of grew up with the generation. Yes, how it grew up with it. Yeah. So the mature themes mainly flew over my head.
That's fair. Yeah, you're 10. Yeah.
I was 10. I didn't really know it, but there were many. Like, honestly, as much as I love Final Fantasy VII, that game gave me nightmares. I was scared. I was scared. Like, I'm not gonna swear, but I was very, very scared.
Yeah.
I used to have nightmares all the time, but I still could. I couldn't get away from it. I kept coming back for more. And it's funny too, because it's funny. I'm gonna tie this back to Final Fantasy VI, and what's interesting about Final Fantasy VI is in that I remember you mentioned this a lot. Now, it's just terrifying, the fact that Kefka, because he has unlimited magic on his side, he can just end anything. He can just end everything in an instant. Like, he just can just do whatever he wants on a whim, and nobody can do anything about that, right? He has all this power behind him, and he's just so insane and so out of his mind that, like, he doesn't care. And yes, that's true. That's very terrifying. But for me, given my scientific background and everything, and how I've identified so much with 7, I find that that 7 really doubled down on the scientific experimentation. Like, 6 had that too, with the Magitech and how Celis was created and how Kefka was created, but 7 just took it to another level, and it's almost Cronenberg-esque when you think about it. Like, scanners, like some of those latest movies and stuff like that. I don't really watch much Cronenberg. I read about it, and I'm reading about it. I'm like, this is basically Final Fantasy VII levels of crazy.
You can draw a lot of lines to cosmic horror. You can draw a lot of lines to body horror stuff with.
Body horror, that's the one. Like,
yeah, especially with Genova in capsules, and it's creepy. When Hojo turns into a crazy tentacle monster, like that's creepy.
The second form, Hojo's second form. Oh my god, the nightmares I used to get from.
Yeah, that's some scary stuff, and that's
actually a really really funny story about that. So when I was 11, I started 6th grade. My teachers. Because we were in a joint class, right? Joint grade 6 class. It was a very odd time. So we ended up with 50 something students with 2 teachers, and yeah, it was crazy. During that first week of school, we had an assignment where we had the first initial of our name cut out a Bristol board. And we were supposed to fill that with all the things that make us who we are. And idiot me drew a Buster Sword on it, and I got in so much trouble at school. They got my parents and just Ryan drew a sword on his assignment here, and we're a little bit worried. And I'm like, guys, it was all about Final Fantasy VII. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's funny. It's giant Buster Sword. And they're and also drawing I like puppy, I like hockey, football. You're like, I like swords.
I like swords. I'm basically the fighter from 8-Bit Theater. I like swords.
I like swords.
I still like swords, so...
Keeping the friend train a-rolling is Julian from the Stage Select podcast, followed by former EGM editor, current co-host of the Player One podcast, and creator of the Generation 16 series of videos, the one and only Mr. Greg Sewart. But we're not here to talk about roller coasters. We're here to talk about Final Fantasy VII. Julian, did you play this of its time?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, yeah.
Final Fantasy VII actually marks a a tradition that started then that I've kept to this day, which is that I bought it on the day of launch, and I have done that with every mainline Final Fantasy since.
Okay.
Because that was, I think, that was the first one where it had a release day. Like,
Right.
you know, this was still an era where a lot of games didn't have like a firm release date where you knew when it was coming out. And this also, for me personally, and going forward in these interviews, this marks when I discovered Game Fellas, this store that I would end up working at for almost 10 years.
Right.
And so I actually went in to pre-order Final Fantasy VII at Game Fellas. And I remember the day that I got the call, like after school, from a guy who had become my coworker saying, "Oh, this is Jim from Game Fellas. For Julian, we have your Final Fantasy VII waiting." And I got my mom to take me to the mall and picked it up. And then got sick over the weekend.
No.
And I was a very sickly kid in school. I would miss weeks at a time.
Wow.
And I missed like I was out sick the week after I bought Final Fantasy VII, but it was just that right kind of sick, Bill, where the only thing that you can do is like play a video game, and I had Final Fantasy VII, so
Yes.
I beat it in a week, and then when I
Wow.
got back to school, like my friends were like, "Oh, how's Final Fantasy VII?" I was like, "It's really good. I beat it."
So back to Final Fantasy VII. Obviously, you were blown away. Visually, it was spectacular. What else about Final Fantasy VII when you were younger? And we'll kind of talk about, because I definitely want to hear about your personal kind of relationship with it, because your opinion has changed as far as I recall from some conversations.
Oh, yeah.
But initially, you were blown away. Obviously, the visuals were stunning. No one had anything, and no one had seen anything like that on pretty much anything up until that point. What else about the game really caught you and made you play it for that solid week and not do anything else?
I mean that intro, right? Like as I'd say that intro, you are already hearing the music.
Yeah,
I know.
Yes.
I know you, listener. I'm speaking to you, listener. I know it's in your head right now because it's in my head too. You can't escape it. You know, the sound of the train, like, you know, cloud like flipping off of the top of it, and you know, like it's just incredible. And wow, yo, that game swore.
Yes, it did. Unbelievable. Your parents, heaven forbid your parents were in the room when that was going down.
And you know, like, and other like, it's like the characters looked so different from what I was used to. There was an actual like black character in a Final Fantasy game, and I was like, this probably should have been done before, but I'm glad it's here now. And like I've kind of fell in love with Barrett like right away, and you know, it definitely felt darker and more mature. You know, again, going into like my edgy teenage, like it was right there along with me, and it felt like video games were really growing up with me.
Yes.
And I've said that about magazines as well.
So what was your first impression of Final Fantasy VII when you played it for the first time? What was your reaction to it? You shared a little bit of it already, but...
Yeah, actually playing it, I mean, it's funny because I was not necessarily like you, where I wasn't a big Nintendo fanboy, but I did feel a little betrayed that Final Fantasy was going to the PlayStation. I didn't own a PlayStation, I think, at that point, because I was a Sega fanboy, so I owned a Saturn.
Right.
But I did buy it because it was Final Fantasy. And like, again, that was the first time I think the Final Fantasy series, I mean, I've used the word cinematic on your show before, but I think that's the first time you could truly say that it felt cinematic, because that cold open is unreal, you know? I mean, and I think probably the first experience with that was the Tobal #1 demo disc, the disc that came with Tobal #1. I didn't buy that, but I know I rented it. Everyone rented that because they wanted the Final Fantasy VII demo disc. So it was playing that demo for the first time. And to me, the big thing that they did that was so new and different and interesting was how they transitioned from full motion video to the rendered static backgrounds, and placed the characters sort of in those videos with some of the sweeping camera motions. You look at it nowadays and it's pretty rudimentary, and like the characters are dancing around a little bit and whatever. But back then it was like, I don't remember seeing anything like that before that demo. And I mean, just the presentation in general, you kind of mentioned it before. I mean, Square had gotten a reputation with Final Fantasy VI here, Final Fantasy III here, for just having sort of this really epic sweeping stories and, you know, these gorgeous graphics and everything. But this was a step above that. It was hard to explain. They showed that the things that they were trying to do on a 16-bit cartridge system, they actually knew how to do it. They actually knew how to make something really cinematic and theatrical, and, you know, like they could get the beats right, and they could get the timing right, and it was so perfectly paced. That opening scene in Midgard, when you're blowing up that Mako reactor, it just grabs you from the second you control Cloud until the reactor blows up, and it just doesn't really let go, and it's so fantastic. I still play that section. I've played that section so many times.
I played it a few months ago just for refreshing myself on the game for these recordings, and still holds up, still gripping, still great. And it's like, wow, this is actually really still excellent. Like, it's paced well, it's introducing characters well, and it's dropping you right in the middle of the action. It's an excellent open. It's one of the best ones probably. I mean, again, I have my favorites, but you can't knock it. And I know so many people who just play that demo, who just play that opening sequence over and over and over again, because why not? It was awesome. It was so cool.
So tightly packaged. It's so easy to just play it, and it's like 20 minutes, I think, and you're done. And it's it's so satisfying.
It's an extremely satisfying piece of gameplay for sure. Yeah. Any other thoughts on it? Like, any other over-encompassing thoughts on the game? Again, we can talk about moments, or I mean,
it was an inescapable thing back then. You know, I mean, that was the only real way to put it. And it was also when, at least for me, it was when I had started, you know, it was around the time that I had started spending a lot of time online, spending a lot of time in chat rooms, and you know, so there were a lot of people to talk to about that game. And it was interesting because a lot of the people that I was hanging out with and chatting with online were older gamers like me, like all, you know, sort of born in the 70s, early 80s, that sort of thing. And a lot of them were role-playing game fans. So it was interesting to sort of have those more intimate conversations about the game when it was new and when the world was experiencing it, as opposed to sort of the unbridled enthusiasm for it that you would see or hear from someone who, again, you know, my first RPG, that sort of thing. And I know I waffled a lot between, because I love Final Fantasy VI. It's still my favorite one.
Yeah.
And so it's like, you know, there was a part of me that's like, well, I don't know if I want to like this as much as I'm supposed to, because, you know, because it did feel pared down to, for as big and epic as it was, it felt pared down from what Final Fantasy IV and Final Fantasy VI had shown us up to that point, but I think for a good reason. So, you know, but I still couldn't help be dazzled by it at all times. Although, although I will say, and this is just the hardcore Sega fan in me, just crossing my arms and going, humph. When Eris died, I mean, it was a big impact on the story, don't get me wrong. But I was so angry about this. This is so stupid. This is an early 20-something. This is an early 20-something nerd being way too precious about what he loves. But I was so angry about how everyone was saying how brave that was of them to kill off a beloved character. When, you know, I had played Phantasy Star 2, where Nai gets murdered halfway through the game, and she's like, the second she's with you from the start, she's treated like a little sister the whole time. And I was like, actually, push the glasses up, you know. But But no, it was very effective, obviously.
Yeah, well, I mean, Phantasy Star 4, I mean, right? Was it Alex, I think it is, or she?
Yeah.
Someone goes down. Yeah, it's like, we've been seeing this, us SNES players have been playing, they're knocking off characters left and right, even in other Final Fantasies. Yeah, but it is a big moment. But it's also, when I look at that moment, it is actually exquisitely done. Like it's the way it's done is, I really love the way actually where the game removes control from you. So, because if you remember, Cloud is the one who is supposed to give her the final coup de grace, because he's being taken over by the thoughts and memories of Sephiroth or whatever it is. And and the game removes control from you. So now you're like jamming on your D-pad, like, whoa, stop, character. Yeah. And then Sephiroth comes in to do what Sephiroth does to finish the job. Yeah, it's effective, but I could totally see someone being like, everyone's screaming about this moment.
Yeah. But that was just me being, like I said, too precious about the things I loved. Being
That's fair.
A 20-something nerd.
Listen,
early 20-something nerd.
I was feet in the ground. No way am I playing some Sony thing. That's not happening. Once again, it is now time for me to say thank you to my wonderful patrons supporting A Gamer Looks at 40 on Patreon. Starting with Philip Becker, Terry Kinnair, Games with Coffee, BT Goebbels, Julian of the Stage Select Podcast, Seth Sergil of the All End Media Network, Tim Knowles, formerly of The Elitist, The Let's Play Princess, Greg Sewart, Joseph Coro, Lindsay Harney, and the one and only and ever smashing Pete Harney. If you would like to join these sensational human beings in supporting the show financially, then mosey on over to patreon.com/A Gamer Looks at 40. Take a look-see at the tiers, and if anything strikes your spirit of philanthropism, is that a word? Then by all means, sign up today. Next up on the show is co-host of the Nerds A Broadcast podcast, Ian, followed by James and JJ of RetroFits on YouTube. Do I play my N64 or did you say PC?
Yeah, I played FF7 on PC first, yeah.
I didn't even know that was a thing.
Yeah, it's FF7 and FF8 got PC releases. Curiously, first time I ever played Final Fantasy VII. I know this is an aside from Zelda, but hey.
No, that's fine. No, that's fine. This is interesting.
I know we love the stories. First time I ever played Final Fantasy VII at all was a demo disc on a PC gaming magazine. And it was... I can never remember the name of the location in the game. It's just before you get to Gold Saucer. There's that little part where you're going through the forest and you come to the mining village where you meet Barrett's family. It was just that little section that was on the demo disc. And that was my first experience of Final Fantasy VII. And weirdly, the family PC that we had at the time wouldn't run it properly. It'd do the battle sequences fine, but the overworld was all corrupted and you couldn't make out which bits were the paths and which bits were the obstacles. So in order to play it properly, we had to get a graphics card upgrade.
That is so interesting.
It was so strange that it was that way around. I thought the pre-rendered backgrounds would be fine, but, and the battle sequences would take a bit more power, but it was the other way around, and it made some of the areas really impossible to navigate.
That's crazy. There's a couple of things that pop out to me. A, I'm still floored there was a PC. Again, I can't, that's amazing to me. Secondly, the demo disc that you had from whatever magazine it was started you off there? Like, it didn't start you off at the beginning, the exciting beginning, the train.
It's such a strange location to have picked, and nowhere even near Midgar.
No, it's in the middle of almost middle of nowhere.
It was literally the middle of nowhere. It's the bit where you've got the broken Mako reactor is there, if I remember right.
I think you're right.
It's a nondescript area of the game, really.
Oh man, so So you had, oh, that's so funny. Oh, that's so weird.
I know.
I wonder, that must be like maybe an England or Britain only thing. I don't know.
I
That's
don't
so
know,
strange.
but I seem to remember it was PC Gamer magazine that put out the demo, and
Okay, that makes sense.
after that, I was really looking forward to the game and getting it for Christmas and seeing all of Midgar was there. I was like, oh, this is beautiful. Oh, but it's all corrupted still. We need to get a graphics card upgrade.
You had to upgrade the graphics card. And this is what year are we in at this point? 97, 8? I'm trying to remember when all these things came out.
Must have been 97, 98.
Yeah, I think
Must have
97.
been, yeah.
Right. So upgrading graphics cards in those days was not like it is now, where you just kind of pop it in, pop it out. It's
I have
easiest thing
no
you could
idea
probably
when
do.
it comes to PC hardware these days.
You're sitting there unscrewing things and changing jumpers and headers and
It was a job for my stepdad at the time, but yeah.
yeah, you weren't doing that stuff.
I'm like, you fix the PC. I'm going to go play Ocarina of Time while you sort that out.
You have your own option. Like, I'll go with option number 2. Well, it's actually 1A. It's 1A and 1B. Like,
That's
really,
the one, yeah.
Oh, that's so good. Awesome, man. Well, so while you were playing Ocarina in your Willy Wonka home of all the systems you could ever need or want at that time, so when you first played it, what really got its hooks in you into Final Fantasy VII? What was the gameplay element that really, just got its hooks into you?
It was the turn-based combat of the demo that really appealed to me. I thought, this is actually quite fun, pressing these input keys and not having to, do the whole all the way around the D-pad and whatever button to do a Shoryuken kind of thing.
Sure.
It was just plain and simple, and it worked, and it made me feel powerful. Just pressing one button and suddenly Cloud's running across the screen with a sword the size of Yorkshire and just slicing at someone. I'm like, I love this.
This is cool. Yeah.
It just felt good. It felt crunchy when he actually connected with his sword as well, with that kind of noise.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, there's a lot of feedback that's actually really, really, really good. So, what was your first impression when you played it for the first time with those friends, with James with your goblin friends, and JJ with people who you were with? Like, what was your first impression when you first played it for the first time?
It was amazing. I mean, just the interactivity that you had that was vastly different from any other RPG I'd ever played. Because, I mean, coming from Super Nintendo, where, you had... well, Final Fantasy 3, but 6 really, and then the others that were a lot more 2D and more simpler sprites. And now we have polygons on polygons, very sharp polygons. And
like 10 of them.
And just being able to interact with most of your environment for, it was all that we had at the time, of course. So, it was great.
Yep. What about you, James?
I mean, the design of it definitely caught me off guard when I played it because I was used to the older, two-dimensional styles. But one thing that I found really impressive that reared its head in another one of my favorite PS1 games, which was... Star Ocean, the second story, was how the background was kind of like a matte painting, but at any point a CG like little cutscene could start and you could sort of tell because everything would go a little bit more like film grainy, like kind of in a filmy art style, but it was the exact same matte painting that would then become three-dimensional in front of you. Because it was like made to resemble 3D so that they could have their characters existing and walking essentially on a 2D plane with various, like, almost like a Photoshop effect of, like, layers.
Yeah.
But then it would go into the cutscenes, so you'd be like, oh, no, this is a fully realized, like, world that you're in. It's just this one static angle that you're playing at. most of the time. So that was a big thing. And I find it really funny because I was one of those kids where I was like, my friend group was so small and carefully selected that like all of the characters just had their names. I always renamed characters in RPGs.
And you still do. And you still do in your show.
Yeah. Well, now it's for comedic effect. Now we could do stuff like rename. Now I feel bad because I can't remember his name from Final Fantasy VI. The thief. It starts with an L. Locke. Locke. That was Fingers. It. Yeah, we just renamed him Fingers just to mess with people.
He's got nimble fingers.
That is true. He's a thief, but when I was younger, it wasn't for that like comedic effect. I mean, who would have known? It was just like, hey, which character do you want to be for this run? And be like, oh, you know what, I want to be him or her, and then we just put in the names and sort of have it play out like a holodeck fantasy almost.
Basically, right. That's cool. So for you, for both of you, it sounds like really, and this is very similar to what a lot of people have said already for this show, is that the visuals are the first thing to smack you in the face. There was nothing like Final Fantasy VII on anything. I mean, not even PC. I mean, PC maybe, but PC gaming was nowhere near what it is now. Like you go from Final Fantasy. Yeah, go ahead.
I wouldn't even say, I wouldn't even say PC at that point because it was so limited. Granted, it grew really quickly, but that was because of games like Final Fantasy VII.
Yep.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Artistically made stuff for PC gaming, like designs built for it, were sort of they were not the norm because FMV like filmed stuff ahead of time, like how Wing Commander did it, where it was just like, hey, we have these actors on a soundstage and we're essentially filming a movie around them, and then you play the game around that.
Right.
That was the norm for PC as far as I knew for like the longest time.
Right. Correct. Yep. But this definitely felt more integrated. Like everything was closer, was tightly wound. No, I totally get that. Finishing up the second half of our intros and first impressions is John Trenbeath of the Beat Crohn's Foundation, and then concluding with some wise words from the Let's Play Princess, also of Nerds a Broadcast.
I watched my cousin play it, and that's obviously a different experience than when you actually play it yourself. So after I graduated college, it was not after I graduated college, it was that next summer in between semesters. I got a job and I bought a PlayStation 1 along with Final Fantasy VII and Castlevania Symphony of the Night. Like those were the two games that sold me the PlayStation 1. Really. And so the first time I played it, seeing that opening cutscene and then immediately getting thrown into the story of being the mercenary Cloud Strife and thinking, I'm 19 years old. That's an awesome name. I wish my name was Cloud Strife.
Yeah.
What the hell kind of name is John? That's stupid. I want to be Cloud Strife. That's one of the things I love about Final Fantasy VII is that opening. Seeing the opening cinematic with that beautiful music and then being thrown into the mission. And like you're automatically fighting guys and you've got a dude with a machine gun arm next to you blasting guys away. You've got this huge sword. You're cutting dudes in half and your character's actually running across the battlefield and attacking people. It was like, yes, you give me all of this. I was there for it. And, learning how the materia worked and, it's the stone itself is what's doing the work. And no matter who I give it to, it's going to upgrade and it's going to gain the experience it needs. And then it's the deciding of, well, who's going to get what? Whereas, I've only got so many slots on my weapon. How's that all going to work? But, just that first opening mission, to me, is one of the strongest openings of a Final Fantasy, or really a game period. It starts hard.
Yeah.
Talk everything you want about, well, the story gets convoluted. Sephiroth isn't really that cool. Whatever. That opening is awesome.
And it's one of those, like, don't tell. Again, I didn't play. I played it for the first time when I was in my late 20s. So I played it and I was like, oh, this is fine. This is fine. So I didn't experience it of its age, which is why I love talking to people who did. Because I can totally see me, if I wasn't such a Nintendo fanboy, I wasn't so insulted that Final Fantasy was on a system other than Nintendo. If I wasn't so insulted, because I had friends who had it, and I watched that beginning opening, and I was insanely jealous. And I was like, this is so cool. This is amazing. And I can't have this. It was great.
That was like, I think right before Christmas break. And so then Christmas break comes and my cousin's going to be in town for a couple weeks, and he's already played through the game. Because I think the game came out at the beginning of December, if I remember correctly.
Something like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Something like that. Yeah.
So he's already played through it. And so this is his second playthrough of the game, because I was watching him play through it all, and seeing it in person was like, oh my God, like, they've really stepped up their game. I mean, these look like people.
They have moving legs and arms. They actually,
right?
That's just like a walk cycle. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, how could games ever look any better?
Right. Right.
So, going into it, like, I was hyped, and seeing it, I thought it was amazing. I thought it looked so cool.
So what was your first impressions when you popped it in and started playing it? And you said you're about 16?
Oh, God, no. This would be around the age of 11 to 13.
Oh, 11. Okay, so earlier. Okay. So yeah. So what was your first impression?
It was really cool. I loved the graphics. I loved the gameplay style of the ATB bar and filling it up, and the idea that you could actually hold circle to make it fill up just a little bit faster, memory serves.
Uh-huh.
And I really enjoyed that the manual actually gave you an idea of how bosses worked. It gave you the little guide to the end of the first bombing run.
Oh, did it really? That's interesting.
The instruction manual gives a guide for the first bombing run up until and including the Scorpion Sentinel, Scorpion Tank, whatever they called it back then.
Yeah.
So it actually tells you, hey, when its tail is raised, don't attack it. Do you have the Thunder Materia? Use it.
Oh, that's interesting. So they actually put some information in there for newer gamers who may not be so used to an RPG. That's interesting. I didn't know that it did that. That's smart.
Yeah, and God, later on, that game for me, because I wasn't, power leveling or really going after specific things, because I didn't know what I was looking for. So it was actually a lot harder, probably for me, than what a lot of people might be saying in their stories. I probably hard reset, started this game 3 separate times.
Wow.
Once at Gnatic, once at the Materia Keeper in Nibelheim, and then once at, I can't remember the name of it, but the crane robot boss that's in the underwater reactor.
Uh-huh. Yep.
And I remember somebody in 6th grade actually had the strategy guide for this game.
Nice.
So 2 years later, after I'm playing it, I'm at Gnatic, I've reset the game a few times, and it's just like, wait a minute, okay, so what am I doing wrong? Is there a thing to this? And somebody had the guide, and I'm like, hey, you have that real quick. Did you beat this boss? And they go, yeah. I go, cool. What is there like some special thing you can do and everything? They just go, use a Phoenix down. Went, what? You remember that 6 is like my favorite Final Fantasy, but it's not my first. This was my first. So I didn't have that idea of, hey, ghost enemies take damage to the curing spells.
Oh, that's awesome. That's right. And that's pretty far along in the game, if I'm not mistaken. Again, I've been refreshing myself on Final Fantasy VII. I attempted to run through, and then the version on Steam I bought broke, and I lost progress, and I said, that's enough of that. How did the
Steam version break?
It broke. I don't know what happened. I can't get past it's early on, too. It's after the first couple hours when you're in, after you blow up the second reactor, you have to go around and you have to find something, and he says find somebody's in a bar, but this person in the bar never triggers, never shows up. So now I can't get past it because it's right before you do all of the weird stuff at the Honeybee Inn or whatever that's called.
Okay, so it was like right before squats and getting the vitamins for the X people and all that fun stuff. You were just getting to Wall Market, but just past the Airbuster. Okay.
Yeah. So super early on, so I didn't like lose a ton of progress, but for some reason, the character and I looked it up, and they're like, it just, this character is supposed to be there for you to talk to do the little handoff, and sure enough, I was not able to. So I was like, you know what, forget it. I don't know. Maybe my Steam Deck did something weird. I don't know. But anyway, anyway, so I've been refreshing myself on the story as over the last couple days in preparation for these interviews. But I think I have a pretty decent handle on that. I played it when I was like my 30s on the PS3. They had when they had the PS3 store where you could buy the PlayStation 1 classics, the PS1 classics digitally. So I downloaded one. They let me see what this Final Fantasy VII is all about. And I liked it. I thought it was fine. I'm like, this is good. Found it very confusing story-wise. I've since learned more about the story, but that's interesting. As an 11-year-old, did the story confound you at all? Because that story goes back and forth and forward and back, and it's jumping all over the place. Really?
I always grew up with harder hitting books. My mom had me reading and, starting to talk when I was around 2.
Oh, wow.
So around this time would be Artemis Fowl.
Wow.
Maybe even my first iteration of getting into Stephen King.
Okay. Wow. That's super advanced for 11. Wow, that's really cool. So you already understood story structure well enough. I remember just thinking, wow, this is just jumping all over the place, and it was cool. Again, I'm 30, I should know much better. But I can imagine for like a set for someone younger like that, it'd be a challenge. But you found it was pretty easy to follow. Okay. That does it for this episode of A Gamer Looks at 40. Hope you enjoyed walking down memory lane and reliving the first time we experienced Final Fantasy VII. Hopefully it triggered a memory or two for you. If it did, I'd love to hear about it. Please reach out to me either on Twitter or Blue Sky. Both of those places have my DMs open. I'd love to hear your story, and who knows, maybe include it in a future episode of this series. This is a living thing that just kind of develops on its own. So please reach out if you have your own stories to share. I would absolutely love to hear them. If you want more Gamer Looks at 40, and I'm biased, but I can't blame you, then go to agamerlooksat40.com. There is a section dedicated to the full podcast series. This includes Earthbound, The Legend of Zelda series from a few years ago, Tales from the Bargain Bin, and of course the Final Fantasy episodes that have all been there. They're all listed right there in one convenient place in a playlist that you can binge on your next 16-hour flight to wherever you happen to be going. Thank you so much, as always, to Pete and Kev for helping me cut up the episodes. Thank you once again to my patrons for supporting the show. Thank you for listening to this edition of A Gamer Looks at 40. And until next time, please just be kind to yourselves and each other.